from Washington, D.C., this is Balance of Power with Joe Mathieu.
James Comey says he will fight the charges. Welcome to the Friday edition as the Department of Justice indicts the former FBI director, accusing him of lying to Congress about Russian collusion in the 2016 election. We're going to get the latest on this from Bloomberg's Laura Davison. We have heard from Comey since the indictment was filed, with insights this hour from Minnesota's Attorney General and former Democratic Congressman Keith Ellison. A conversation you won't want to miss. Analysis from our panel. Bloomberg Politics contributors Jeanne, Zaino, and Rick Davis are with us for the hour. We've got a lot to cover. Beginning on Wall Street, Alexis Christoforous has her view on the markets right now in a Bloomberg Business Flash. Alexis, how's it look?
Looking pretty good here, Joe. The Dow's on a tear, actually, as Wall Street tries to claw back some of the losses from the past 3 days. That's after the Federal Reserve's favorite inflation gauge showed while prices are still high, they barely budged in August. Investors betting that'll keep the Fed on track to cut interest rates even further. That same PCE price index showing personal spending rose more than expected, helped by spending on back-to-school items. I mentioned the Dow. It's up now 325 points. In the broader market, the S&P 500 gaining 32. The NASDAQ Composite now rallying by 64. The yield on the 10-year, 4.18%. We've got the 2-year at 3.64%. Shares of some big drug makers, including Eli Lilly, Merck, and Pfizer, all higher today after President Trump said he would place 100% import taxes on pharmaceuticals beginning October 1st. But those tariffs would not apply to companies building U.S. plants in the U.S. And the Wall Street Journal reporting that Boeing is regaining some authority. The FAA to perform some final safety checks on its 737 MAX aircraft prior to delivery. That's easing the plane maker's burden to get more of its profitable aircraft to customers. A quick check of Boeing shows it's up now 3.5%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Alexis Christoforous. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Back over to Joe and Balance of Power.
Appreciate that, Alexis. Great to have you on board today as we bring you political news from Washington and connect the dots to Wall Street. That's our charge here at Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio, on satellite radio, channel 121, here on Bloomberg TV, of course, and on YouTube. Search Bloomberg Business News Live to find us on YouTube. With much to discuss today on the Friday edition. It has been a doozy of a week, and it just keeps coming. Last evening, the indictment of James Comey, the very latest out of this White House. And I'll let you know, the president has left town. He's up at the Ryder Cup. But on his way out, he was asked by reporters about this indictment of the former FBI director, who you know Donald Trump is not a fan of. He's now being accused of lying to Congress about Russian collusion in the 2016 election. The president was asked as he left the White House today, who's next? Let's listen.
It's not a list, but I think there'll be others. I mean, they're corrupt. These were corrupt, radical left Democrats. Because Comey essentially was he's worse than a Democrat. They weaponized the Justice Department like nobody in history. What they've done is terrible. And so I hope there are others, because you can't let this happen to a country.
We're not going to figure out likely who's next in this conversation, but Laura Davison is with us now, Bloomberg's Washington Deputy Bureau Chief, with more on this. Laura, this is a remarkable moment. We're hearing the word unprecedented, Rubicon crossing. How should we look at this?
This is really just a massive escalation over the past, several weeks. We heard Trump, just about a week ago, go to take to social media and tell Pam Bondi, hey, I want to see action on some of these cases. Through pressure, the prosecutor in the Eastern District of Virginia, steps aside. A new person who's a Trump loyalist goes into this role, and within a matter of a couple of days, we see this indictment come out. So there's a lot of questions because the two other names he mentioned that he wanted to see investigations into, Adam Schiff, a senator from California, as well as Letitia James of New York. The question is, are there going to be indictments coming for them in the next couple days or weeks?
What does the Department of Justice make of this? There are still some career officials at the DOJ who've never seen anything like this before.
Correct. This is, very unprecedented. There's been a feeling really going back, 50 years or so that the Justice Department, it's not the personal, prosecutorial arm of the president. They work for the government, and that there's sort of a little bit of church and state separation there, so to speak. That is not at all how Trump sees the Justice Department. And you see, career folks, longtime staff, across the Justice Department, either sort of, raising red flags or stepping aside. And it's, clearly Pam Bondi views her, primary loyalty to Trump rather than to the department itself.
There is not a warrant for his arrest, which is interesting. We're not going to see him in handcuffs, I guess, but there is an arraignment in October. Where does this go from there? He says he's going to fight.
He came out very quickly last night with a video saying, he's not afraid, go ahead, let's have a trial. It's very reminiscent of what he said, back in 2017 when Trump fired him originally. He said, Lordy, I hope there are tapes when they were talking about this conversation. Yeah. So this is, Comey is not one to step down, in a fight, but it's not clear right now. The indictment was very short. It was not particularly specific. So some legal experts have speculated that, it's possible that this case could be dismissed, just that there's not enough evidence there to move forward.
Interesting. And of course, we're already waiting for an emergency Supreme Court ruling on the firing of Lisa Cook. He's keeping the courts awfully busy here. And I'm assuming that they expected that Comey would want to go to trial. So let's get the ball rolling, right?
Yes, and this is also Trump's playbook here. He wants to keep some of these battles in the spotlight. He wants to keep his base happy. This has been a pretty good week for him in terms of getting some of these deals. TikTok done. He's at the Ryder Cup today. He's a handful of boos, but also some cheers.
Is that true? Did you see him get there? I didn't see the arrival. He made it to the course.
He's there. He's with his granddaughter, Kai Trump. She's sporting some her own fashion line today.
Some fashion line. She's 19 years old or something. Is this Don Jr.'s?
This is John
child?
Jr.'s oldest daughter, but it's a real sort of split screen moment because on Capitol Hill, Hakeem Jeffries is up there talking about how we're hurtling towards a shutdown deadline, within a couple days.
Well, so let's talk about a couple of other things here. I already said this has been a doozy. I guess next week will be a real doozy when the government shuts down. Are we just qualifying this as inevitable now, where it's Friday, there's no deal, and no one's talking?
No one's talking. Congress has not been in session all week.
Yeah.
The Senate's not supposed to come back until Monday. They may not even start voting on things till Tuesday. Remember, the shutdown deadline is Tuesday into Wednesday at midnight. House is not scheduled to be back until Wednesday. So this is the key players are not even in place. Both sides are really dug in. Trump even kind of shrugged off the sort of the risk of a shutdown earlier today. Said if it shuts down, it shuts down. Both sides are really angling for a fight.
Well, that's for sure. The big question is going to be how long it stays closed at this point, right? How do you get it back open? And I know that's something that we'll be tossing around here. Democrats, though, at this point are united, right? You're not hearing about Democratic senators, say from Virginia or Maryland, who might quietly be prepared to vote yes next week.
You're starting to see a little bit of commentary. Chris Van Hollen came out and said, "Hey, look, we'd like to, kind of get some of these talks started." Tim Kaine as well.
Yeah.
You start to see that the door opening here. Klobuchar, was on a call with Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota was on a call with reporters this morning saying that she wanted, she said, "Look, we're not asking for all of our demands, but we are, we're willing to negotiate here." So you're starting to see a little bit of uneasiness. It's also we're 4 days out, 5 days out from a shutdown. This is about the time that the sides start to get a little bit serious, but there's a lot that they need to get through. And you've got Schumer and Jeffries who don't want to be seen as, just really caving in to Republicans as they did earlier this year and really took a beating from the base.
Well, we got the countdown clocks up. It's never good when that happens, and we'll just have to live through this together next week. And Wednesday is when we would be closed, presumably. I haven't even mentioned tariffs. I haven't mentioned TikTok. It's just a steady hose, a fire hose of news from this White House. TikTok deal, not really a deal. We were talking to Matt Schettenhelm at Bloomberg Intelligence. He says ByteDance still the primary owner. This runs afoul of the law.
This is, I think the thing that both markets, investors, and sort of even just, app users are asking of, what does this mean? The thing that Trump signed yesterday, that order just really sort of keeps the process moving. It does not close the deal. It does not finalize the deal. One of the things that would really sort of shock people yesterday is when Vance came out and said, "Hey, look, we think that the valuation of TikTok is going to be about $14 billion. Yeah. That caused a lot of, confusion because folks
far cry.
Were anticipating somewhere, 35, perhaps as high as $40 billion. This was all kind of more clarity was put around that today when, our tech team earlier reported that that ByteDance would still own about 50% get a 50% of the revenue share essentially from the company.
That's not how that's supposed to work.
This is not what people were expecting, and it means that there's just a lot of details of this already very complicated deal with dozens of investors involved that could be quite complicated.
Well, it's always a pleasure to spend some time here on a Friday with Laura Davison. Good luck this weekend. I hope it's not a working one. I just said that out loud. Our deputy bureau chief here in Washington, D.C. There's a lot more to talk about, by the way, involving electoral politics today as we're spending time here on Capitol Hill. A member of Congress is running for governor in New Jersey, and There's a big story about what's happening involving Oppo research into Mikie Sherrill, the Democratic representative from New Jersey. Washington Post now reporting that she and leading Democrats are calling for an investigation now, what they call a politically motivated leak of her unredacted military service records. This is a pretty big deal. The National Personnel Records Center improperly gave an ally of the Republican in this race, Jack Ciattarelli, unredacted personal information about Mikie Sherrill, including Social Security numbers, the whole bit. It's being called an egregious blunder, a technician's mistake, and we have big questions about what's going to happen next, which is why we assemble our political panel. Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis and Jeanne Zaino are with us. Rick is, of course, our Republican strategist and partner at Stonecourt Capital. Jeanne is democracy visiting fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center. Just to start off here, Rick, as somebody who's run a lot of campaigns, and I'm just going to assume you've never dealt with any Oppo research, how unusual is this, and what should Mikie Sherrill do about it?
Yeah, look, I mean, Oppo research is a standard in the industry, right? Not only on your opponent, but also on your own candidate. One of the first things you do is you say, look, let's look at the records. I remember in 1999 with John McCain, we were pulling service records and things like that just to see what our opponents might find. And yet you have to have authorizations to get this stuff, right? That on a FOIA request, it's a very limited amount of information that the archives will give you on a military service record. And certainly better redactions than having your Social Security on every page that they turned over to the Sherrill campaign, basically. So this is a huge embarrassment for the agency that is charged with managing our national archives. And it's happened before. Don Bacon had his service records released to his opponent. I mean, like, they need to get their act together. Regardless of the requests that come in, we have to depend on these institutions to do their part of the job. And in this case, pretty clear failure.
Wow. The House Oversight Ranking Member, Robert Garcia, who may not have the power to make this happen, is demanding an investigation of what he calls illegal, likely politically motivated disclosure. This comes down to something that happened at the Naval Academy in 1994. Mikie Sherrill and a number of her classmates were not allowed to walk in the ceremony because of a big scandal. It was a cheating scandal going on here that involved a number of students. If this is, again, took place in 1992, the scandal itself, she would have walked in 94. 24 classmates were expelled. Jeanne, Sherrill says that she didn't walk because she did not turn in any of her classmates, that she, in fact, did not cheat on this test. What is the political implication of this disclosure?
Yeah, first of all, I don't know why you're assuming that Rick Davis hasn't done Oppo research, Joe. We both know he has.
I'm just, okay.
I know. I think, number one, the timing of this could not be worse for her campaign. I mean, the latest Emerson, I think it was the Emerson poll, had them neck and neck. And of course, we all know that New Jersey has been moving a bit over to the more, I don't know what you want to call it, reddish, purplish side. So this is going to be a big loss for the Democrats if she doesn't retain this seat. And I think, certainly you hear the Democrats, you mentioned Garcia, Hakeem, Jeffries, they want to get to the bottom of this. They want an investigation. They may get one. But the question is, was this something that was done by mistake, as they are saying, a technician, or was it truly done in order to undermine her and the campaign? Regardless, the information released is very personal, including Social Security numbers, phone numbers. I mean, the list goes on and on. So incredibly damaging and arguably a violation of the Privacy Act. So whoever did it may indeed be held accountable if they conduct this investigation. Yeah.
You mentioned the Emerson College poll, Jeanne. They did this with The Hill and Pix 11, 43 to 43. Mikie Sherrill, Jack Ciattarelli, 11% still undecided. Rick, what's going on in New Jersey? You buy these numbers?
Yeah, I think it's a relatively close race. Ciattarelli's a well-known candidate, run before, member of the legislature. And so I'm not surprised that it's close. Remember, it wasn't that long ago, we were electing, Chris Christie to 2 terms. as governor of New Jersey. Republicans can compete statewide. It's not a blue state. But the bottom line on it is this will upset the apple cart, right? There'll be a discussion around this. And what is interesting is how Mikie Sherrill will handle it, because obviously it brings to attention not just this cheating scandal, but her service in the military, helicopter pilot, Patriot. It's quite a contrast with Sherrill. And so I think one of these things you have to always look at, like, whoa, can this boomerang on us, right? I mean, like an attack on her time in the Naval Academy reminds everybody that, she put public service first when she was, 18 years old and served admirably in the military. So at the end of the day, I'm not putting much credibility into the outcome based on this controversy because, of course, the other thing is it looks like political manipulation, and Trump leaned in on it even in his comments. So at the end of the day, it's going to be a close race, and we're going to see whether or not the Democratic machine in New Jersey is able to get out the vote. I mean, it is interesting that basically the youth votes going Democratic and the senior votes going Republican, and the battles in between.
Well, Rick makes a good point here, Jeannie. It reminds us that Mikie Sherrill has used her military service as a centerpiece of her candidacy here. And that's why this is a story to begin with. She did, we should note, go on to serve in the Navy for 9 years, as Rick mentioned, helicopter pilot. The Academy, the Naval Academy website lists her as a notable graduate. She received the Navy Achievement Medal for saving the life of a fellow shipmate while at the Academy, and the prestigious Distinguished Public Service Award in 2024. That's the Navy's highest civilian honor. So if you're advising her campaign today, Jeannie, do you tell her to get to the Academy right now, go to Annapolis, and film a new ad on campus?
Yeah, you might. And I have to say, I think she has done a good job already, because you read the quote. I mean, what she is telling voters is the only reason that I was kept out of the ceremony was because I refused to turn in my fellow classmates. In other words, I am not somebody who is going to go and, tell who was involved. I will keep that to myself. And for many people, particularly in New Jersey, that is a very respectable reason to do that. And so I think she has been trying already to turn this around. And she follows that by saying, to your point, I served 10 years, highest level of distinction and honor. So she is trying, and her campaign is trying to use this to her advantage. And she is no snitch, Joe Mathieu, and that's what she wants people to know.
Said it.
So
you said it. So is that the bumper sticker? Is that the bumper sticker, Rick? You're running for governor of New Jersey. Hey, I'm no snitch.
Okay, let's just be totally clear with our listening and viewing audience. It is a violation of the Academy Ethics Code that if you are aware, do not turn them in. So regardless of the situational ethics of my co-panelists, I don't think that's a particularly good campaign focus.
All right. We covered some good ground here. See, this was productive. We just figured the whole thing out, or at least what you can't do. Rick Davis, thank you. Zaino, thank you. Bloomberg Politics contributors, and the best we have here. Our conversation coming up with Keith Ellison right here on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Mathieu in Washington, reeling the city at large over the indictment of James Comey, the former FBI director, something we've been talking about quite a bit throughout the day here. He says he's not afraid. Bring the trial. And we have a great opportunity to tap the experience and insights of Keith Ellison. A perfect moment for this conversation. Of course, the former congressman, now attorney general in Minnesota, is in town for the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation events that we have told you about stretching across the week, and has just emerged from a fireside chat at the convention center where he was joined by several other Democratic attorneys general to talk about the rule of law in this country. Mr. Attorney General, it's great to have you on Bloomberg. Welcome back.
Great to be with you.
We've got some heavy stuff to talk about today.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering your thoughts just initially on this indictment. Have you investigated the case? Does the government have a case against him?
Apparently not. And it looks like the career prosecutors didn't sign the indictment. It looks like this was obtained by the person who was simply put in there by Trump to get the indictment. And so it's not something that is a result of an investigation by trained prosecutors looking for the truth. It has all the hallmarks of just a vindictive prosecution. And I think that it appears to me that if you believe the people who actually dug into the case, that it's thin when it comes to evidence, and I think Mr. Comey has every reason to be confident.
Remarkable post on Truth Social by the president on Sunday evening.
Sure.
To Pam. You see this? Pam, we can't delay any longer. It's killing our reputation and credibility. They impeached me twice and indicted me 5 times over nothing. Justice must be served now. Some folks are seeing this as I hate to keep using the cliche, the Rubicon crossing moment for the Department of Justice. Is that the level of which you're viewing this?
It certainly feels that way. I mean, that particularly Truth Social post, it looks like pure revenge. It looks like we're simply using the Department of Justice as a weapon of revenge against political opponents. I mean, because I'm used to indictments that say, well, on this time and place, you committed this act which violated the criminal statute, not you did this to me, so I'm going to do something to you. This is simply not how we do justice in America. It is absurd. And, of course, it happens. And then within a few days, we see these indictments come out. So, it does portend very, very, odd for the future. A lot of people, I think, are now thinking, okay, well, if you're going to do this to the head of the FBI when other career prosecutors have said that case lacks evidence and should be declined, who are you going to get next? Who is safe here? And because if the head of the FBI can't expect basic justice, then who really can in America? Very concerning.
He's mentioned a couple of names. And was asked about this morning. They asked him on his way out of the White House, who's next, and do you have a list? Listen to what President Trump said just this morning.
It's not a list, but I think there'll be others. I mean, they're corrupt. These were corrupt, radical left Democrats. Because Comey essentially he was worse than a Democrat. They weaponized the Justice Department like nobody in history. What they've done is terrible. And so I hope there are others, because you can't let this happen to a country.
You can't let this happen to a country. Wouldn't want to be Letitia James right now. Wouldn't want to be Adam Schiff. Are those the next two?
Well, if you go by what he says, the bottom line here is that democratic countries don't operate this way. This is what happens in banana republics. This is what happens in countries where the rule of law is not observed, and that, essentially the government is an instrument of somebody who is all-powerful and can just direct it wherever they want to. But thank goodness in America we still have juries, we still have judges, we still have the rule of law, we have people who care about American justice. So I have faith in the American justice system. I would have hoped that there would be a no bill of indictment in this matter. But of course everybody knows you can indict a ham sandwich. We've all heard that before. But I think that when this matter starts working in the real machinery of the criminal justice system and motions start getting filed, I have confidence that this matter is going to be dispatched in fairly short order.
It is somewhat ironic that the guy who threw the sandwich at the National Guard wasn't indicted.
Right.
But I'm just kidding around here. If these guys do go to trial, though, James Comey says, let's do this. Yeah, will they be vindicated?
From what I've seen, I think yes. But I am also disturbed by another story going around, which has to do with the head of Homeland Security, Mr. Tom Homan, who apparently, according to news reports, exchanged $50,000 with the promise of favors to get contracts. That matter is, of course, still alleged.
Yes, he says they found nothing illegal, no wrongdoing. He didn't deny it, though, which was interesting.
Which is interesting, but apparently there's video, and I think the public should see it. It should be something that if you did nothing wrong, that there shouldn't be any problem with you releasing the videotape, and we can let so other people be the judge of that. But I mean, the problem is you can't, on the one hand, say that we're going to just ignore this one because this person's a political ally, and we're going to go after these people because they're not. I mean, I'm not sure who the person was, but somebody said, to my friends, anything, but to my enemies, the law. And so this can't be the basis of an American democracy. We have to have a fair system. This is what we've all been raised to expect, but it's not what we're seeing right now, and it's deeply disturbing. And I tell you, as a lawyer, you swear an oath, to uphold the law. As a public official, you swear an oath. And these oaths are very important right now. I think that anybody who's going to carry a bar card in their pocket needs to go back and remind themselves what they said they stood for.
Interesting. As we spend time with Minnesota's Attorney General Keith Ellison, I have to ask you about one of the other big stories just in the last 24 hours, this deal to sell TikTok to a group of U.S. investors. Now, we have to be careful with this because we actually haven't heard from the Chinese. The president says there is a deal, and if we take him at his word here, it would not fulfill the law that's on the books, as ByteDance apparently would still have a majority share. That aside, you're no stranger to TikTok. You just sued the company 2 months ago.
Sure did.
Over what?
Well, we sued them because we believe that the way that they operate is damaging to the health and mental and emotional health of children. Yeah. And we're concerned about a number of features. The filters, which we believe have a damaging psychological impact on children, leading to bulimia, self-issues, depression, things like that. Also, we're concerned about TikTok Live, where you can have a person go on there and perform live and then receive a tip, and TikTok gets part of the money. If they don't have proper age verification, you don't have to be very imaginative to wonder what somebody would give a tip to a young girl for. If you understand what I mean. It just seems like an invitation to abuse. And then on top of that, there's this endless stream where you can just go on and on and on. It'll capture your imagination, and you'll be stuck in there. And teachers, parents have talked about the damaging effect and how we've got to get a grip on it. So we know that they've designed their algorithm to be attractive, and we consider it to be like digital nicotine.
Yes, okay.
And so we're going to hold TikTok accountable, whoever owns it, So I've been asked.
So that can transfer ownership. The lawsuit goes to who owns the company.
Might just, So I don't know who we're going to be negotiating with.
You might be talking to Larry Ellison pretty soon.
Well, I'll tell cousin.
No relation.
Right. I'll tell cousin Larry he's got to clean up his act.
Well, you said something that's fascinating. You said like nicotine. Your lawsuit refers to addictive algorithms.
Right.
10 years in the future, are we going to look back at social media like we do cigarettes now, like we do cars without seatbelts? How do we ever let this happen?
I really do think so. I mean, look, as technology moves at a faster pace than our rules do, right? And there is a place for TikTok. We don't want to ban TikTok. We're not here to shut down TikTok, but just like any useful but susceptible to abuse thing, we need to put the right guardrails around it. And it would be better if the companies just did that. I do know that there are rules that are applied to Chinese users of TikTok that don't apply here in the U.S. So we already kind of know the better way to use the tool, and that's what we have to move towards.
This is a fraught time for attorneys general on the state level.
We've been busy.
And boy, you have been, and we can talk about this in a lot of different ways, but I wanted the fireside chat that you held today.
Sure.
Focused in part on states' rights.
Yes.
Has the issue of states' rights turned from a conservative one to a democratic, liberal, progressive cause?
I think it has.
When did that happen? 6 months ago?
It turns out that the issue of states' rights, the 10th Amendment, is an important right, although it's not an absolute right. And so one of my great heroes, a man named Hubert H. Humphrey, who was the mayor of Minneapolis in the 1940s, went to the National Democratic Convention and said we have to walk out of the dark shadow of states' rights into the bright sunshine of human rights.
Okay.
And that, in many ways, brought forth the civil rights revolution that followed in the years after that, and that we're trying to hang on to right now. But nowadays, states' rights. Many of Dem AGs are asserting the 10th Amendment, saying that look, this is beyond the authority of the federal government to do. One case that we just saw recently, we had a favorable ruling in a lower court was where the federal government said that if you want to receive federal emergency management assistance, that you have to have your state law enforcement essentially carry out federal immigration responsibilities. Yeah. We said, no, we have precious state resources. We don't have to do that. And the court sided with us. And this is a debate that's recurring. It happens on a range of issues, that when the federal government conditionalizes aid to states, whether it be health care money or agricultural monies or whatever, in exchange for or conditionalizing something like getting rid of diversity, equity, inclusion, or ICE involvement. Or it's a common and recurring theme, and we're relying on that 10th Amendment.
This is a big, think part of the story, and I'm really glad that you could join us to talk about it. Keith Ellison, in town for the CBC, Minnesota's Attorney General. Come see us again. I enjoyed the conversation very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your insights. I'm Joe Mathieu in Washington. This is Bloomberg. Important news, as we've told you, in the last 24 to 48 hours involving the war in Ukraine. First, the word from European nations. Leaders, of course, gathered this week for the United Nations General Assembly, and we've brought you conversations with the leaders of Latvia, Finland, Estonia, who have seen their airspace violated by Russia repeatedly, not only drones, but fighter aircraft. And so the message to Russia, the message through back channels to the Kremlin was, we're prepared to shoot you down next time this happens. The Kremlin responding. And by the way, Donald Trump, of course, endorsed that, as we told you, the idea of shooting them down as opposed to intercepting. Warnings that NATO countries would, in fact, be ready to do this. Getting quite the rebuke from the Kremlin. Spokesman Dmitry Peskov says this is another very significant escalation of tensions near our borders. We heard from the Germans this morning on Bloomberg. Germany's foreign minister, Johann Jadefuhl, had this to say about this idea.
NATO, Germany, our countries do not have any interest in escalation, but Russia perhaps wants to lead us into a trap, as you mentioned. But Russia has to know we are prepared for each and every situation.
He spoke with Vonnie Quinn, and it's a great pleasure to bring Melinda Haring back into the conversation, non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center. A rare treat as well to be able to do this in person. Melinda, it's great to see you. Your thoughts on this particular development, and there have been a couple important ones this week. Is this an inflection point in the war, coming off of that post from Donald Trump in which he suggested Ukraine could actually win this?
In a word, yes.
Okay.
So in the last couple of weeks, we've seen NATO airspace be invaded by Russian drones and Russian fighter pilots.
Yeah.
And we see this in Hungary today. There's accusations in Hungary. But I'll go straight to the quote that you showed from Moscow. So Moscow is blaming, they're blaming the West, Joe, which is kind of amusing because they created the problem. They're saying that this is escalation and that it's unacceptable, but they're the ones that caused it, right?
Yeah.
This is typical. This is what they do over and over again.
We're no strangers to this. Our aircraft have been intercepting Russian bombers over Alaska for the last 40 years or something, right? What was the aim here, though? Was it an attempt to divide NATO, thinking that Viktor Orban wouldn't have any part of this conversation, or is it just Putin being Putin?
I think Putin feels like he can get away with it and there's no consequences. So he's I think this is NATO country number 4 that he's sent either drones or fighter pilots over in the last month. So we see him upping the ante, and he hasn't really faced any consequences other than the Estonians. The Estonians did escort those 4 Russian fighter jets out, and they called a meeting at NATO, and it was the first time the Estonians had ever done it.
Amazing. We talked to Estonia's foreign minister a couple of days ago from the UN, knowing the visceral emotion that Estonians feel, the memories they have of Russians rolling down the street and literally shooting their then parents or grandparents, the occupation that followed. They see that as being possible again, don't they?
Right, they do. History is alive. And history, I think in an American sense, we tend to think of history as this beautiful thing where it's constantly getting better. And that's not the Eastern European view of history.
Right.
The Eastern European view of history is dark, Joe. And it wasn't that long ago. And people have this lived memory. And you see the same thing in Poland, right? You see Radek Sikorski's message this week. And he's telling the Russians, we're going to shoot anything down that you fly over our airspace. So it's not even backroom deals. It is direct signals.
Yeah, we're saying it out loud. So is that the right move right now? What would happen if somebody shot down a MiG-31? What would Putin do?
Nothing.
Really?
Yes.
You're sure of that? Because so then it's not an escalation in this case.
Well,
it's a measured response.
This is a classic Russian textbook exercise. They are trying to scare us. They have a weak hand right now because Donald Trump has decided, for many good reasons, and I hope we'll get into that discussion, that he supports Ukraine. He is sick and tired of Vladimir Putin's lies. He tried for 6 months. He didn't make any progress on negotiations. And we saw this week that Trump is throwing in for Ukraine. So what happens? Dmitry Medvedev starts talking about using nuclear threats again. We're at Bloomberg. We can put this on a graph. Anytime the Russian hand is weaker, then they resort to escalation.
Is Medvedev already out there, or you're just remembering the last time?
It is a mathematical relationship. I'll draw it for you next time I come in.
Okay, very good. There's an equation here. Talk to us more about what motivated Donald Trump, because you know that the line in Washington is he's going to talk about or believe in the message that came from whoever talked to him last. He talked to President Zelensky that day that he sent that post. Did Zelensky somehow convince him of this, or were there other voices in his ear?
There were other voices. So President Zelensky is a masterful communicator, but it's not right to give him full credit.
Okay.
So we've talked a lot about Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is not ideological. He can swing back and forth, as you well know, and that drives many people crazy, and it makes it good to be an analyst in Washington, Joe. So to be serious for a minute, though, there are different voices within his administration. We see Keith Kellogg, General Keith Kellogg, and he's a hawk, and he has Vladimir Putin's number, and he is talking to President Trump regularly. And then we see J.D. Vance, and he has an opposing view, and he wants to make a deal, and he wants the war over as soon as possible. So we see these two camps, but there's more people, right? This is a complicated situation. It's been going on for months. The person we haven't talked about, and I think the most influential person, and we're starting to see more and more of her, yes, her influence, is Melania Trump.
How about that?
Melania Trump doesn't make much of herself in foreign policy matters. But
remember what she wrote about the children.
Right, right. Melania Trump knows what's going on. And we saw this earlier this year where she's talking to Donald Trump about the bombings. And we've seen a massive escalation of Russian bombing of civilian targets, of hospitals, schools, children, churches. Melania knows what's going on. And we saw Donald Trump reveal this. But there's more to it, Joe. Her two best friends are Ukrainian American.
Is that right?
Yeah.
This is fascinating. Look beyond the policymakers then, or the officials at the DOD. It's what he hears when he goes upstairs to the residence at night. I haven't heard that before.
It's a big piece. So we know that Donald Trump is also, he's not the most moral man, I think is the most polite way I can put it, but he does have a moral conscience. And I think that this issue of children resonates strongly with Melania. Melania is traditional. She's an Eastern European woman, and she's made a lot out of being a mother to Barron, and that's her priority. And she knows about this issue. More than 20,000 Ukrainian children have been abducted by Russia.
That's right.
And we saw her write about it, and she's talking to Trump about it. And I think that issue there is real resonance there with both of the Trumps.
President Zelensky talked about a weapons system that he asked President Trump for when they met. One, he said, that could help to end the war, that would put Kremlin officials in bomb shelters. Do we know what that is, what the ask was that he made?
We don't know what the system is, but I can tell you there are a couple of easy things that would end the war.
Okay.
If Washington said...
Easy things.
Let's do it, yes. I mean, bring some generals on here, and they'll tell
What do
you
you have?
long-range rockets.
Okay.
Long-range rockets will end this war. So you need to enable the Ukrainians to strike behind enemy lines and hit command and control centers. It's a matter of logistics. If the Ukrainians had the ability to hit, they need German Tauruses and they need long-range ATACMS.
Okay,
and they need the ability to hit anywhere that they need the ability to hit into Russia.
Yeah. Producer James just put a story in front of me here from Axios. This is since we came to air. Zelensky asked President Trump during their meeting to provide Ukraine with Tomahawk missiles. Is that something we're prepared to do?
That would be a game changer.
That would be a game changer.
But, we don't know. So, Joe, I'm encouraged by the news this week.
Yeah.
Trump has had a major change. It's a major about face. The Ukrainians have never had a better relationship with Trump than they do at this moment, right? But Donald Trump didn't commit to anything new. It's just a rhetorical change. And with Trump, it's always about the money. Is he going to commit to more appropriations in Congress? At this moment, there's no signs that Congress is going to be doing something more. Tomahawk missiles would be a game changer, but also turning off, there's restrictions on U.S. weapons. So when we give Kiev weapons, we give them rockets. We tell them you cannot strike into Russia. There are limitations. DOD needs to remove those limitations. If DOD would remove those limitations, Trump can pick up the phone and call Hegseth right now and say, let the Ukrainians strike into Russia and hit the enemy lines. That would be a game changer. But we also have to provide sufficient missiles as well.
He's promised to not target civilians, which, of course, Vladimir Putin has. And getting back to the conversation, the talk about children, what's the path for their return short of a formal armistice agreement?
So children are being returned right now, Joe.
Yeah.
I just got back from Kiev, and there's an amazing, one of my heroes, his name is Mykola Kuleba, and he's the CEO of Save Ukraine, and his organization is a nonprofit based in Kiev, and they have helped save more than 600 children. And each path is different, but they're able to contact the children once they've been abducted, and working with relatives and very fearless people. This is the Underground Railroad of the modern century, and they're able to get these children home and rebuild their lives. I would love to bring Mykola in and have a chat with him.
You've introduced us to some truly fascinating people from Ukraine. Many of them have told us such tragic stories here. They've been very emotional conversations. How much time did you spend in a bomb shelter when you were there on this last visit?
So I was in Ukraine when General Kellogg was there, and we talk about the Kellogg shield, right?
So they know better.
So when General Kellogg comes to Kiev, it's not so bad. But I spent 2 of 4 nights in the bomb shelter when I was there last month.
2 of 4 nights. This is still their reality, which is why Zelensky says this about the Kremlin. We want them to know what it's like to be in a bomb shelter every night. Will he accomplish that? Will he get this weapons system he's asking for?
I don't know. So this is when we have to get into speculating about Trump's behavior.
Right, that's right. And there's not much productive to be done there. Short of the Tomahawks being delivered, though, what is the strategy for President Zelensky at the moment, short of trying to occupy Russian land and even the playing field? Militarily, what's his next step?
Okay, let's talk about the front lines.
Yeah.
So the front lines are not bad right now. The Ukrainians are holding the line, and there's a Russian offensive, an ongoing Russian offensive. The Russians are not making very much progress. The Ukrainians don't have enough men. They need more materiel, and the Europeans have committed to delivering that. They could use a lot more materiel from America, so we're looking at Trump there to send more over. But so far, the lines are holding. The Russian offensive will start to peter out around Christmas time.
Right, we've got the seasonal factor here.
Right. We have mud, we have leaves. We've all become meteorologists, Joe. So at Christmas time, the Russians have to reduce their air, their ground cover, because the leaves have fallen and they won't be able to use their aviation systems.
No foliage. Fascinating. This remains a war of attrition.
It remains a war of attrition, but the military experts expect this war to continue on. So the Kremlin wants to see what it can get, and it's going to continue. Mathematically, the Ukrainians could probably fight for another 18 months. There's a lot of ifs in there, but this war is going to continue.
Yeah. You know when you're going back?
December.
You want to go with an answer? I would love to go there with you sometime. It would be remarkable to do it with Melinda Haring. Are you kidding? Thank you so much for the on-the-ground update, as it were, and your insights, as always. Melinda Haring with us live on Bloomberg. Business Week Daily's up next. I'll meet you on the late edition of Balance of Power at 5 p.m. Eastern here on Bloomberg TV.